Awesome, exciting. Well, let me just pull up my slides to share here and we will dive right in. But I'm really excited to be here at the gathering with you all and have the chance to talk a little bit about marketing techniques that I hope will help all of us, really bring the good food movement and strengthen the farm to table movement as best we can. So I think we have a lot of juicy details to go through and plenty of time for questions. And with that, I will dig in and share my screen. Can everyone see that all right? Great. So today we're covering understanding your audience, how translating consumer insights into action for your organization and business. And I'm really excited to be here with you all. Just a quick introduction. I'm Becca Brown, and I'm the founder and CEO of Uppercase Industries. We are a marketing strategy and consumer insights company based in Burlington, Vermont. And at Uppercase, what we do is guide clients through a simple insights gathering process, help them cultivate an intimate knowledge of their customers in a short amount of time, and really use what we learn to craft data-driven growth plans that really work. We like to say we're awesome at what we do because we really are driven by a genuine curiosity for humankind, and really understanding what makes people tick is sort of what makes me and my team tick. So I'm excited to share some of that with you all today. I'm also a Vermonter, as I mentioned. I am an obsessive cook, a gardener who is maybe contemplating getting chickens, and a mom to two, in my opinion, very charming children. I've spent, really relevant to today's talk is that I've spent the bulk of my career in the food and agriculture space. I like to say that I've worked pretty much across the entire food supply chain, from the farm to the grocery space, to restaurants, to the kitchen. And so I really pride myself on being able to understand what folks who are either running organizations or running businesses in this space are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and figuring out what the best use of everybody's time is, and where we can really move the needle and make a difference. So I really love helping entrepreneurs and change makers grow their businesses in a way that lets them improve the world with what they do, while also fueling their personal dreams. I'm always looking for ways to help leaders focus and use their time wisely, rather than kind of taking a scatterbrained approach, which I find is, in the world of marketing, it's like a tangled web that can take you anywhere, and you can go down rabbit holes really easily. So I always try to provide that focus when I can. So I just want to, you've probably been in some other sessions today, but just a quick reminder to, grab a notebook, tune in. I think you'll really get the most out of this session if you're focused and we have your attention. Also, please open your chat box and feel free to add questions as we go along. I'll be sharing some questions for you all as things go by. To start out with, I'd love for everybody to take a minute to introduce themselves and share the answers to 3 questions. So just where you're logging in from, what town. Obviously, I'm anticipating most of us are Vermonters on the call. If there's anything specific that you're hoping to learn, and then what business or industry you're in. It's always really fun to get to know people a little bit with that. And then just make sure you're sending that chat to everyone. I'll give a minute for folks to respond here. And sort of giving you an idea of what we'll cover today, we're going to talk about, what exactly is consumer insights and consumer research? How do we define it? Why it's worth your time to get curious about your customers? The framework that I recommend using to think about growth, some actual, hands-on actionable tips to how you can get started with this, and then we'll have some space for Q&A as well. And my hope is that you'll leave with a deeper understanding of how getting to know your customer or your stakeholders can help your business grow. I'm going to share the proven method that me and my team use for gathering information on your audience that you can replicate in your own work. And then the know-how to turn what you learn into actionable steps. A lot of times it can be really interesting, of course, really easy to geek out on all of this stuff and, start getting obsessed with checking your numbers or writing surveys or something like that. But how do we actually take what we learn and put it into action, and how we find time in our day to do that? And we'll talk about that specifically a little bit. And on that note, what you won't leave with is a massive to-do list. I understand everybody is very busy. This is not a session that's about adding a huge project to your list. It's really about refining things and making the most of your time and making sure you're saying the right things to the right people, which in the end should save you time. So that's my hope for today. And let's see, I love seeing these come in. Let's see, we have Kelly, hoping to learn audience insights and how to identify some new target audiences. That's great. We can definitely talk about that. We have Carolyn, we're from AgriCycle, who is going to be growing a food scrap recycling service here in Vermont. This is great. Thank you, everybody, for sharing this. I encourage you all to read these introductions. Awesome. Agency of Agriculture and Food and Markets in Cabot. How are consumers getting their information, and how strong is the Vermont brand outside our borders? Great. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Great. I'm just trying. I'm getting distracted with all these great questions here. So take note of any of these questions so we can come back to them when we have a Q&A. A little prompt for you to consider. I'd love everybody to think about, what is your biggest customer related obstacle to growth right now? So, are you having trouble breaking through to people? Are you having trouble growing your audience? You just don't know anything about your audience, or are your customers complaining? There are a lot of, at first I was just going to ask, what's your biggest obstacle to growth? But I, of course, want to focus us on your audience, the audience component for today, because, there can be operational and supply chain obstacles to growth that I am not qualified to answer and address. So digging right into some definitions that will help guide our discussion. So what does customer research or consumer insights even mean? I know these terms can be very jargony and kind of amorphous. So I want to go right in and share my approach to thinking about them, which is a very straightforward one. I really like to think of customer research as the process of inviting people to the table and listening to them. And it's really as simple as that. It's about putting yourself in their shoes and understanding how what you do fits into their day-to-day life. I do projects where I go deep into a research process over and over, and I'm always astonished at when you take an hour to talk with somebody in an interview, or see what they write in a survey, or, look at their data in another way. It always is refreshing and helps you understand, you're sitting over here thinking about your company every day and the work you're doing, but this other person is having a very different experience all on their own. And that seems obvious, but it's, very easy to forget when we're going through the sort of machinations of our day-to-day work. So a question for you all, when you hear the term customer research, what do you think about, and have you thought about it for your business at all? I'm curious to hear about that. Awesome. We have just such a great group of folks here from all over the place. I'm just going to read a couple of the chats here. Beth from Maplewind Farm. I know your farm. I shop from you sometimes. That's great. Thanks for coming. Interested in growing an audience. Need more people regionally to get into my funnel to grow my shipping business. Okay, that's a great challenge to think about. And we have Kelsey from UVM Extension. learn how to apply understanding of customer insights into the dairy sector, specifically around labels. That's awesome. Okay. And so, historically, consumer research has been sort of the realm of Madison Avenue, which is like where if you're not familiar with that, that's where the advertising agency and sort of the Mad Men era of all those big companies who do those iconic advertising campaigns. That's where it was all born, on Madison Avenue in New York City. And the approach that we like to take is really more of a Main Street approach. So, you might have heard about this type of marketing work in the context of, really big data that feels like an invasion of privacy. A lot of entrepreneurs tend to think that this isn't really available to them because it has to look like a months-long process with, 5 or 6 figure price tag that ends up with a giant, 200-page PDF report. And, how could any small business or small organization or even small state possibly afford that or deal with it? So the good news is it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be something that misses the human element or discounts human beings. So, we can really approach this field with a comfortable conversational approach. Really asking ourselves, what are those missing pieces that I need to bring my strategy to life? You don't need to know everything. You just need to know the right things, and having real life conversations with folks. It also can look like really simple tools like a 5 to 10 question survey or a social media question. It doesn't have to take weeks. You can turn some of these processes around in just a couple of hours. And of course, we want to make sure we're valuing real human beings throughout everything we do. Another thing that I often hear is, why would I undertake this effort to understand my customers when I can kind of like just look at my social media and see what the big brothers of data are spitting back out at me, and like, understand those, use those numbers to guide my business? And the answer is that yes, I mean, some of those automatically generated numbers are good and can be important, but those types of figures are really monitoring what's happened in the past. And when you talk to real human beings, whether it's virtually or in person or with a tool like a survey, you're really getting a sense of what's going to happen in the future versus people reporting on their previous behavior. So it's an important distinction. And I'm curious to know if any of you have ever reached out to customers for ideas, and if you have, how it went. So let's see, Christine shares that her assumption is getting accurate and meaningful consumer insights is prohibitively expensive. Yes, that's what I was just saying. There is a kind of an instinct that it can be prohibitively expensive. Certainly it's possible to spend a lot of money on this type of work, but it's not necessary. You can do bite-sized pieces of things, whether it's something you work with a smaller consultant on or you handle internally. It's definitely available to you. So why bother understanding our audience at all? This is a question that is important to address, especially among creative folks and entrepreneurs. So, a lot of times we think I'm in charge here. Maybe you're an entrepreneur who started your business and you're a really creative person and that's what was driving you, and you're the one who has that passion. So we kind of think like, well, shouldn't I be making all of these decisions? Why should I be asking my customers? And that's a really valid question. Famous quote from Henry Ford, and something a lot of us have heard before. He says, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have just said faster horses, right? Like as the innovators in the world, it's supposed to be our job to come up with what people want. That said, there is a lot to be gained from understanding your audience. Another thing that I see all over the marketing world is a lot of messaging that tells us sort of, if we really know ourselves deeply, then somehow magically our brand will attract other people if we just make it really truthful and all about our intuition and personal branding. And this is particularly often aimed at female entrepreneurs. And this type of work certainly can be helpful, but it really misses out a key piece that that allows you to, not your business doesn't have to be all about you or all about your organization, and it shouldn't be. You need to have it overlap with your customers as well. So this is what I was getting at before. It's really not all about us. It's so easy to get blinders on and really go deep into what we are doing, whether it's the fulfillment of that or the passion for that and the expertise. And I'm going to go into a few case studies a little later on about what happens when passionate marketers get too too deep in the weeds about what they're doing. Most people are really going to be up at a surface level and not understand that expertise as you would. So it's important to align those two things. And this is the framework that I use to kind of guide all of our thinking at Uppercase and the work we do for our clients. And I like to say we today, and in my job every day, I'm really spend most of my time in the orange circle. So, the business opportunity is very important. I always like to give the example of a pizza restaurant for this to kind of bring it to life. So if we think of the business opportunity as, okay, you're starting out trying to open a farm to table pizza restaurant, right? You need to make sure it's in a town that is big enough and has enough customers to actually support a business, right? You need to also not be on a street with 5 other pizza restaurants. So that's kind of this blue business opportunity category. Your authentic truth is also your vision and your passion and creativity. That's you coming to the table with your particular spin on pizza, right? So it's, maybe you want an Italian DOC style, maybe you're going for Chicago deep dish. You're going to be coming to the table with certain elements that you're really passionate about and that make your business special. And then we have the human need or challenge. This is, means that we have to be able to reach people who are actually interested in eating pizza and who want to have the type of pizza that you have. And so it's easy, where we get into trouble is if we stay over here in our authentic truth, and maybe we are cheese people, right? We're obsessed with the kind of cheese that we put on our pizza and we talk about it all the time. We lead our marketing messages all about cheese. But what if the customer doesn't actually care about cheese? What if they care about the tomato sauce? And that's what we're trying to understand, because if we're over here barking about one topic and the customer cares about something totally different, we're wasting a lot of time and money and our business is going to stagnate. But if we can get those two things to align as they're overlapped in the diagram, that's where the magic really starts to happen. And that's where the growth opportunity is. And that's where, all of our lives get a lot easier if we're in this zone. So what we see is, when you're really spending time in this middle zone of overlap, you save time, you feel more confident with everything that you do, and you earn more money in your business. Or, if you work for a nonprofit, you are having more of an impact. So let's see. I'm just checking the chat here. Brief pause. Anson is asking, what is the best way to talk with your consumers one-on-one, but how do you approach it with a bigger audience? This is great. I will come back to that. So I recommend taking, when we look at really like, how do you dig into the details of doing this? It's a 3-step approach. So we start out with asking questions of both ourselves as business leaders and of sort of brainstorming the questions that you want to ask your customers. Then we go out there and we get the answers, and then we turn it into action. So I'm going to take you through a process to do this. And I actually have a little interactive prompt for everybody to take some time to answer in a second. So let's get to work. So starting out with something that's called the value proposition, which is essentially saying, we do X for Y person. So for my own business, it's, I do marketing strategy and consumer research for businesses who are trying to make a positive impact in the world, would be a short way to say that. So, when I like to start out with this, because getting really clear on your value proposition helps to focus everything in your organization a lot better. And also, we are going to come back to this because it can really reveal some of the assumptions that you're making. So what we're going to do is write a value proposition. Then we're going to talk through some numbers. And then when we get to the action phase, we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to come back to the value proposition and say, do we need to refine this, or was my assumption correct? So what I'd like to do is take everybody through a quick exercise, and I have a link to share with you, or a worksheet that you can keep and come back to. But you don't necessarily, it's not like you need to print this out or even start a new Google Doc. I've just shared a Google Doc in the chat that you can take and make a copy of if you want to make your own copy, or you can just jot it down in your notebook. And I'd like everyone to, I'm going to put some music on for us and put a timer on, and have everyone take a minute to try to write down your value proposition. And there are two formats here. It's really simple. It's just a short description of who you are, what you do, and why you do it best. And these are sort of like it should be written like a sentence, and you can choose the sentence format that works best for you. So what I always say is just pick the one that's easiest for you to fill in, because it kind of helps you get into the flow. Does anyone have any questions before I pause for a minute to let us all do that? No? Okay. Great. So I'm going to try doing something I have not done before, which is play music on a webinar or on a Zoom call to help us all get into that creative frame of mind. And I would love to hear, I'm going to ask for a few volunteers at the end to share what you write. So just be prepared for that. Hopefully we have some brave souls among us. All right, so I'm going to just give us 2 or 3 minutes to do that, and then I'll come right back to you. Not sure if the music is working.
Becca, do you have that embedded in your PowerPoint, or is it a separate device? The music.
Oh, I was trying to play it from my browser. I think maybe that's the problem.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think you can do 2 things at once.
Okay, that's fine. It's not essential. I think if we can just have a little bit of quiet time to think then. So I'm assuming a couple of you guys have gotten started, so I'll just give us another minute or 2. And if anyone needs more time, would just let me know when I check back in. And I'm going to write one too. All right. Well, I'm going to come back to you all here now, and I hope some folks are ready to share your value proposition. I'll start, and I'll be brave and start by sharing what I wrote. I shared a brief one a second ago, but for my business, I used the second format, and I said, we help world-changing businesses create reliable growth strategies by learning about their customers. And so, I wrote that quickly. I probably, if I was going to put that statement on my website, I would probably workshop the copy a little bit. But just having that down on paper can really be a useful guidepost for growing your business, leading your marketing, and also learning about your customers. Because if you wrote something down there and you said, you're trying to market to a particular type of customer, then that's where you start to get some guidance on how your entire marketing strategy should develop. Is anyone comfortable to share their value proposition that they wrote? You can either post it in the chat or you can put your video on. I see one brave soul. Hello.
Hi. I actually got stuck on the buy, but I did the first format, and we have an online market. So our online market helps connect customers with locally grown or produced food who want to support local farmers or producers. And the buy, I wasn't sure, by purchasing online or
Yeah, maybe by purchasing and eating foods from farmers nearby or something like that. That's great. That's perfect. So, when just a few things I noticed right off the bat, when you said I have an online marketplace, I immediately thought, okay, I don't know what she sells in that marketplace, but then we went through and it comes out right in the statement. So that's exactly how you want this to kind of go through, that you should have a real clarity on your business. If somebody who's never heard of it before, like me, should be able to understand it after reading that. And I think you succeeded there. So that's great. Do you have any questions that came up for you while you were writing that?
Sorry, my phone is ringing here. I was doing this. Just the buy. I wasn't sure how I should do that, but so.
Yeah, that's a great question. And for anyone else who's wondering about that piece is like the customer gets something for you, and the buy is like what they do with it in their life. So they want to support local farmers by eating local food or something like that. I think that might help clarify. Yeah, that buy looks a little like it's a sort of by itself dangling down there on the worksheet. Let's see, I have somebody else here who looks like you're ready. Sorry, your name is hidden when the video comes on, with the yellow wall behind you. Go ahead.
Oh, Lottie, hi.
Hi, Lottie. Thank you.
Sure. So I have our social enterprise Just Cut at the Center for an Agricultural Economy helps farms and institutions who want to support local agriculture and the consumption of healthy vegetables by us buying local vegetables from farms, utilizing one of our commercial kitchens at the Vermont Food Venture Center, and then selling to Vermont and New Hampshire universities, hospitals, and K-12 schools. And I know there's some workshopping in the middle there, but that's my first stab.
That's great. Yeah, I think, we definitely got the gist there. I think I would probably try to trim that down a little bit and tighten it up, but I think you have all the pieces there, and that sounds like a great organization. So nice work. Any questions came up for you?
Yeah, I think I find that when I'm talking about the social enterprise that we run, that we operate, I'm never really sure. There's so much that is important about it supporting farms as well as institutions, and also the establishment of local jobs, that I find myself very torn and not sure which one to talk about. And so it's a big mouthful, essentially.
Yes. Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. And this is something that's very common for nonprofit organizations and you know, any organization with multiple stakeholder groups in general. You really do have, you know, in my job, I'm always like, pick one audience and focus on that audience. And I love to kind of bang that drum. And I mean, I'm making fun of myself a little bit, but that is important. But in your situation, you kind of get a free pass from that, because you definitely just do have multiple stakeholders with very different interests and needs. And so what I would recommend is just tackling them one at a time. So I would, you know, let's say you come up with 4 groups of stakeholders. You have, you know, the universities, the farmers, or maybe let's say 3, and like donors, if you have donors. I would do, you could even do this exercise with just focusing on each one of them. But I do think it's a valuable exercise to really separate them. And then, you know, of course, you need something that ties things back together at the top of the organization, but sometimes almost in that separation, you can kind of see a theme when you drill down to that level. So that can be really helpful.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Anyone else? I see one other person here. Oh, great. We have some more here. Let's see, this is so funny that I can't see the names of the people. There's only one other person with your video on right now. If you want to, did you want to speak up? Go ahead.
Sure, I'll give it a try.
Hillary, okay. So your name shows up when you start talking, but I couldn't see it before.
I'm here for Salvation Farms, which is also a nonprofit, and I had a lot of the same thoughts going through this, and mine didn't quite format correctly, so I'm just gonna try it. So our programs help farmers and recipient sites who want to increase accessibility to surplus agricultural products by increasing the aggregation of those products.
Okay. That's great. I think that's very clear. The one thing that I could use more clarity on is the first part. I think you said donors and recipient sites.
Farmers and recipient sites.
Okay, so I'm not exactly, I think I know what a recipient site is, but just trying to use I always try to listen with a total beginner's mindset. And so, you know, maybe that's a great, I'm glad you said that, because this is a good point to bring up. Sometimes you need to explain things and sometimes you don't, right? So if you're only talking about this in a context where everybody knows what a recipient site is, then you're good to go. But if you're trying to bring in folks from other industries who maybe don't know what that means, then you'll want to just define it a little bit.
Oh, that's a great point.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about when I say we all get our blinders on, right? Like you're at your job every day using that term, and that's as it should be. You're an expert in this field, and you know, you have your colleagues who understand you. But when we think about the broader audience that we're reaching, you know, we have to just pretend that they, in a lot of ways, don't know anything about what we're doing. And I see that particularly in the good food movement, in the way we talk to consumers, there's a tendency to talk over people's heads, right? And really get geeky with, you know, all of the, whether it's like organic certification or a health message or the reasons that it's good to shop local. And at the end of the day, somebody just wants, you know, to buy either they want to just buy something delicious or they have a budget issue. You know, you really have to simplify, and then we see the breakthrough happen. So awesome. Well, we have some more here on the side. I'm going to keep going for now, but so my goal here with the presentation piece is to be finished as close, let's see, we started at 1:15 and we have till 2:45. So my goal is to finish up and leave us with a half an hour of Q&A. So if we have time, which we probably will, to come back and workshop some more of these statements, we can certainly do that. And we'll just scroll back up through the chat. So thank you, Kelly and Beth and Ben, for putting those in there. Awesome. Moving right along. So next, after kind of doing our value proposition work, and one note that I wanted to make here before we move on from this topic, sometimes folks are hesitant to get specific about who they're serving because they say, well, you know, what if somebody who doesn't meet that description walks through my door and wants to purchase from me or donate or whatever the case may be. And you know, I just want to assure you that specificity does not equal inclusion. Being specific about your customer, you know, within your internal team and when you're doing your marketing certainly doesn't mean that you're closing a door to somebody who doesn't necessarily fit that description, and that you wouldn't just accept business kind of from anyone who made sense to you. You're not putting that out there. You're just focusing. And what actually happens is sort of the reverse, is that when you're specific about who you're serving, it's easier for people to look at you and say, oh, I recognize myself in that, and I'm going to join in because now I feel welcome here, because there are sort of these markers that are telling me I'm welcome, and you know, they can feel right at home. So that's an important piece. And I was asking folks to share the value proposition in the chat, which you already did, so we're ahead. That's great. So moving into our next phase, step 2 is getting answers. And I couldn't resist a little crystal ball here. So this is looking, there are a lot of ways to do this, but obviously we have an hour and a half together. So I wanted to talk about one particular method of data collection, and that's using customer data that you probably already have within your organization. I'm going to go through 3 different types of data. I'll be very surprised if everyone here doesn't have at least one of these that's accessible and already being recorded in some way, which is great because, you know, that's how the world we're living in is very digital. We're kind of collecting data by accident almost all the time. So I like folks to start out here because it's a little bit less overwhelmed, right? There's not this hurdle of needing to go out there and collect data. You can start just being more rigorous about looking at what you already have, which is great. So your customers are really telling you what they want and when they want it. And I would also add why they want it every single day, which is great news. You just need to know where to look. So that's what we're going to talk about now. So first of all, your website is a treasure trove of information. I love using Google Analytics for this. But if you don't have Google Analytics set up, whatever hosting platform, I use Squarespace for my website, but there are lots of good ones. So there's going to be some form of analytics that shows you the traffic and how people are getting there. Usually you just have to click your settings or your analytics button. And so what I always recommend folks do first is identify out your top 10 most visited pages. So this can be, you can either do this, you know, just the basic 10 most visited pages of your site. If you have a blog, I would also take the next step of checking which blog posts historically have been the top 10 most visited or top 5 most visited if you don't have a ton of content. But this is a very revealing process if you've never looked before. And what it does is it just tells you what people are interested in, the people who are visiting your site. What are they interested in? Are they really interested? A lot of times the about section of a website is a really popular button, and that if yours happens to be high up, that tells you people are interested in the story behind your company and how you got there, and you know, kind of your why behind it, and that you may have an opportunity to bring that to the forefront. And then the other things to look at are the what buttons are getting clicked most. And there's some great, if you Google heat mapping software, there's some really very easy automatic heat map generation tools you can use. That helps with a number of things. I mean, again, first of all, just seeing what's sort of already sticky, as I like to call it, those places on your website that a visitor's eye is drawn to. And it also shows you, where there's opportunity to showcase something a little bit better. Like, let's say you have something that's you think is really important to your business. So maybe you have a CSA sign up that you want people to see, and then you do this analysis and you see that it's just not getting that many clicks. So then that tells you, okay, maybe I need to move that button and make it more easy for people to see. So that's just kind of a little tip there. Let's see. Mieko is saying she recommends hotjar.com for heat mapping your website. That's a great one. I also use Crazy Egg sometimes. And this, I know sometimes doing something that's technology, that's new technology can sound intimidating, but I promise this one takes like just 5 or 10 minutes to set up. And then I like to, I always have my notebook with me. And what I like to do is when I'm doing these analysis, just jot down a few ideas that, you'll naturally have ideas. You'll look at a button and you'll say, oh, maybe I should change what that button says. Maybe I should need to move it over here. Or maybe, I noticed that this one page about our animal husbandry is getting a lot of clicks. And so maybe I'm going to go do a social media post about that topic, because clearly people are kind of raising their hand and telling me that they are interested. So that's step one. Any questions there? I'm going to share a quick example. So this is a case study, a client I worked with who was a food and wellness blogger. So I always think it's helpful to have real life examples to see how this stuff works in action. And she was really interested in starting her own line of products. And this is an area, product development is an area where learning about your customers can be super helpful. But she was wondering how she should focus. She was really considering a whole range of products, everything from kitchen tools to toothpaste. So obviously, those two things are going to require very different audiences. So what we did was analyze her top performing blogs and found a clear pattern. The ones about skin and hair care were performing the best. And so that's what she decided to focus on. And now she has a successful line of hair products. And, you can see, just think of, sometimes I think of if she had made a line of kitchenware and pots and pans, like those things would be just dusty on the shelf somewhere, because that's not what her audience wanted from her. And we took the time to learn that, and it really paid off. So, brief background on the process there is we identified and categorized the top performing content. She heard what her customers were most interested in. She was able to identify new products to launch, and as well as the messaging that would work best. And she successfully launched her new line. So that's a great example there of how to use that website data. Sales patterns are another one. So anyone who, I'm sure a lot of you sell at farmers markets. If you, you probably have some anecdotal knowledge of what people are asking about and selling. I mean, of course, what is selling, because, right, if you come to the market with coolers and then they're empty when you leave, that's data right there, right? Like, data doesn't always need to be in a spreadsheet. It can just be you observing how your inventory is moving. And that, those numbers are real numbers. So certainly don't discount that. But if you can't name your number one selling product or service, it's definitely time to find out, because that right there is a very important thing. That's a clear message that your customers are telling you. And let's see, Beth is asking, no, you don't need to be super techie for these. They're very easy. And I'm planning to send out an email with this, the PDF of this presentation, and I'll make a note to include a little link to a to the one that Miyako mentioned, Hot Jar and Crazy Egg. So, you know, once you learn your number one best-selling product, what are the second and third best-selling items? So, and really look at the dollar amounts, the units sold, if you do have that those numbers, because you know, you get just different slices and insights into the data of what is, you know, if you just look at it by dollar volume and then, but you have a lower priced item that's actually selling a ton, that's very indicative of what your customer wants from you. If you have something that sort of comes in types, like let's say you have chicken and you're mostly just tracking like the total volume, you know, you would want to go a level deeper and, you know, track whether your white meat and your dark meat are selling at different rates, and anything that can kind of be categorized, try to do that. And then look at seasonality in your business. Take a look at your previous 12-month sales and notice any bumps. And, you know, sometimes, a lot of times what I do with clients is look back at their sales patterns and then actually use that pattern to plan our marketing for the next year. Because what you always want to do is go with the momentum in your business. So let's say, you know, you notice a pop around Easter and Passover sales, but you don't really do a lot of messaging around that. That's an opportunity. If people are naturally coming to you for those products, and you see a sales bump that kind of came out of nowhere, that means, you know, there's a reason for that. And then that's also something you can encourage in your customers the following year. So that's where seasonality comes into play. And then, you know, just it's so much nicer to have that stuff planned out in advance and know it's coming versus scrambling at the last minute and saying, oh my gosh, you know, there's a holiday around the corner and now I have to come up with an email and put it on my website. So taking some time at the end of the year is a really helpful way to kind of get ahead of that. And so all of these numbers tell you what your customers want and when they want it. And a lot of times there's a little bit of a story behind the numbers. You know, maybe Mother's Day is big for your company and you never really thought of yourself as having anything to do with Mother's Day. So that's kind of a question for you to answer, you know, and untangle what is it? And so you can, you know, if you have a customer you're friendly with, you could ask them about that and try to get to the bottom of it. And so an example here is a case study from a former client called Real Plans. It's a meal planning app, and they were targeting allergen eaters and moved to the paleo set of eaters through this process. So what we did was, you know, this is a meal planning app. They were ready to take it to the next phase, but they weren't sure which path to take with their marketing. And they were really data savvy, but it turned out that they were actually quite out of touch with who they were selling to and even what they were selling. So they have different versions of their meal plans and for different dietary types, and they weren't looking at the breakdown of those types. So they were just assuming that most of them were allergy based, but then when we downloaded it and looked at and we made a little pie chart, it turned out that almost 80% of people were in the paleo category. And so obviously a company that's serving folks with food allergies versus people who want to eat a paleo diet, you can see right there that those are very different messaging approaches. And so this is why it's important to have the right one. So we started out with a simple analysis of the type of meals that people were planning. And like I said, it turned out that the majority were paleo. So we categorized their product sales. We came up with some hypotheses for growth. Then we took a next step and decided to actually interview women who were in that core customer category to help identify new ways to connect and attract them. And then we really prioritize a lot of their recipe and blog content around paleo eating to focus on that core. We identified new products and features to launch, and their business doubled in the next year. So this is really how powerful this type of work can be. It can be the thing that breaks you through to the next level in your business. I've seen it happen again and again. Any questions here? Great. And the final one, excuse this little typo here, is I'm kind of lumping two together because if you don't have a website with a search bar, I want you to still have an option here. So it's either your frequently asked questions or the search bar on your website. And this is one of my favorite ones. If you have a search bar on your website and you have never looked up the terms that people are searching, you're going to love it, because it is so fascinating to see what people are looking for, in the terminology that they're putting in, and it's right there on your website. So I highly encourage you to look at that. And so, where there are questions, there is opportunity. And I put these two things together because I see the search bar as sort of a virtual frequently asked question. They have a question about something, that's why they're searching for it, or they're looking for an item. So I hope that doesn't get confusing, that they're lumped together here. But the gist is that people ask questions about things that they are interested in, right? So, a question is a flag to you as the business owner to tell you that this is a topic that my customers care about. So the first step is to really identify your unique FAQ and just either have a conversation with your team or spend some time thinking about it and brainstorming, what are the questions that people walk up to you and ask all of the time? You're going to have a few, top 5 are going to bubble up. And then think about how you can be more proactive really with your communication around that topic. So can you show, if people are asking how you make something, can you show a sneak peek behind the scenes? Can you tell a story? If people are asking a lot about you and your story, what else can you tell about how you came to do what you do and the passion behind it and how you learned it? And then you can also use this information to train your staff to steer people towards an upsell, right? If people are asking, let's say you sell clothing and they're shopping for coats, but they're asking about where a good place to buy gloves is, maybe you can start carrying gloves in your shop, or have a social media partnership with a glove maker or something like that. So these questions, I really look at them as sort of, every time we get a little bit deeper, you're going on a path to having more knowledge about your customers. And this can be really conversational, right? This can just be, keeping a notebook by your cash register, again, if you're in a retail setting or a farmer's market setting, and trying to just jot some notes down during a quiet time about what you're noticing people are asking. And this is also, if you do have a team, this is a great job to assign to maybe a junior team member who would be excited to take this on and really learn, come back to the team with what they learn. So it doesn't have to be something that takes a lot of time and effort, just a little bit here and there. And this example is from this is my only non-food example in the presentation, but I just thought it was too interesting not to include. So this is a company that is a one-stop shopping marketplace for parents, and they were really striving to be the top destination for stylish parents, but unsure if the customers were thinking about it that way. And we turned to the search bar. And so their goal was really to be the source for all things kid, right? Not just toy. I mean, they wanted to be the stop for toys, furniture, clothing, apparel, everything. But when we looked at the search terms, we noticed that most people were either searching for toys or apparel. And that's what they were known for. So we realized we had our work cut out in the other areas. So the pattern that we found was really inconsistent with the image that they were striving to portray. And as a result, they're now entering into a rebrand process, and they're really empowered to bridge that gap. And that's an important thing to note for you all. Hang on, I'm just gonna brighten up my screen here because I'm looking very dark here. I want you to be able to see me there. Sometimes these exercises lead you in places that are a bit surprising. and you say to yourself, it seems like I'm reaching this kind of customer, but I really wanted to be reaching this other customer over here. And that's totally fine. But now you're empowered to do something about that issue, and you can keep track of it, and you can track your progress and really see where it takes your business, or see if you need to have a pivot. So this particular company, they are going to really emphasize the other categories that they're offering, which is furniture and baby gear, and give them, because they feel really confident about those products and they feel like they should be selling better, which is a great thing to explore. So they have their work cut out for them. Any questions on all of this? We are about to get into the Q&A phase. So let's see. A quick word on taking action, right? So again, it can be a little overwhelming to get all of this data, and then, we don't want what you learn to sit on a shelf somewhere. That's one of my biggest fears that I try to make sure I build into all of my client projects, is that I don't want to just pass off a list of cool things we learned about your customers. You actually have to do something with that information and help and use it to bring your business forward. And that's a really big potential opportunity for you. So how can we go about taking the next steps? There are a lot of ways. So the first thing is, like I promised, we want to come back to our value proposition. So let's say, you go out into the world, you have your value proposition that you wrote, just go through one of the data types that of the three that I just went through. Then it's time to kind of look back and see if assumptions are coming into play. Let's say you said you wanted to target people who want to support local farmers, but if you have a website and you have a local farmers page on your website and nobody's clicking on it, then it's time to check that assumption, right? Maybe people are coming to you for a different reason than you thought. And so we want to see those things matching up. And if they're not matching up, that's a signal to you to make a communication shift or to make some type of a strategic shift. There are a lot of ways that you can use this data. I think I would recommend, again, you pick one of the three types of data and then choose one of these potential action areas to work on. And that could honestly be enough for a couple of months of work, or, of just observation and seeing how that changes your business. So if you're in a phase where you're developing new products, use it to inform that process. If, obviously it's Q4, holiday plans are well underway, but if you're still planning to put out some messaging for the holidays, or some type of New Year's campaign, you can use this information to inform that. Going back to my favorite one, which is the search bar, the words that you find your customers are using, I recommend using those, literally using the words in marketing campaign taglines, because that's one great way to make sure you're really speaking your customer's language and you're not kind of going into the realm of jargon and industry specific terminology. Take a look at your website, your homepage. Is there an opportunity to add a tagline there and really be clear about, I call it a "we make X for Y" headline. So, we make make this food for people who like eating in this way, or whatever the case may be. Get really specific on that and see where it leads you. We can use this type of information for wholesale account selection. So let's say you notice that your customers are really asking a lot of questions about the health benefits of what you sell. Then look at the list of if you do sell wholesale, look at the types of stores you're selling in and make sure some of them are healthy, have a health angle as well for their customers. So then you start to align those things. And that, the whole dealing with wholesale accounts can be a massive project. So it's nice to have a way to kind of narrow that down and get that focus there. Another area that's great to focus is your marketing channel strategy. Let's say you look at, you start looking at some of your customer data and you notice that, we didn't talk specifically today about how to get this data, but an easy place to start is to sort of look at the age range of the customer that you're serving, which you can find on some website analytics, and also surveys are great for this. But maybe you find that they are an older audience, and so then maybe you focus your marketing efforts on, this is a generalization, but Facebook tends to have an older audience than Instagram and TikTok, say. So like we can cross TikTok off the list and really focus all our efforts on Facebook, just as one example. So, this work can really help you to eliminate pieces of your marketing plan that you feel like you should be doing. But in reality, you just really, the most important thing is to pick what works for your specific business and your specific customer. This can kind of help you be free from the feeling that you need to do it all. And your email and social copy should absolutely be written with your target customer in mind. So everything you're learning in those 3 steps is leading you towards a target customer profile of some kind. And when you sit down to write emails, or somebody on your team does, you should have a specific audience in mind. And I think it was Lottie was saying, I have multiple audiences, and how do I think about that? And so, that is a great place to work on being specific and writing for just one audience at a time. Okay, any questions here? Actually, it's time for our Q&A. So I'm going to go back to all those questions. And before we jump into that, I just want to show my website here. You can head there to sign up for our newsletter or take note of my email. And I'm happy to keep in touch and keep this conversation going, and give you support in whatever way that I can. So we'll take some time to just talk and see what questions came up. I'm going to stop my screen share so that we can see each other a little bit better. I see some questions going in. Oh, thank you, Kelly. Yeah, you should, if you want to sign up for our newsletter, there's a pop-up that comes up on uppercaseindustries.com, and I'll also share that in an email later. So do you have any tips for, let's see, Beth is asking the question. Sorry, my lighting in here is so funky. Just one second, I'm going to open my window because it's getting very dark in here. Still not used to that daylight savings time, huh? It's just getting dark so early. Okay, digging into Beth's question. I do have tips on online surveys. So I write a ton of surveys. It's one of the main jobs that Uppercase does. And I think that they are really, really useful, but your question is right on, because it does matter how you set it up. So the first thing to really think about with writing a survey is your goal as the business or the organization, because that's going to steer everything. So for example, this week I'm sending out a survey on packaging design, and that particular survey is very specific. And we're only asking about 5 questions because we just want to get super into the details of what is on the label and what is performing best. But that's one type of survey. If you are doing the first survey you've ever done to your audience and you're trying to understand who your core customer is, which is another very common type of survey that I work on, I recommend using a format that is I think of it as kind of an upside down pyramid. And I actually have a survey writing guide that I can share with you all in an email. This is getting to be a long email that you're going to get from me. But so it's an upside down pyramid approach. We start out asking questions all about the recipient and their lives. And it's really just trying to get a sense of who they are. So, you know, that part of that is demographic information. So, you know, age, gender, where neighborhood type, whatever, you know, the basics there. But I also try to get, you know, the psychographic element is often much more important and useful to coming up with a core customer profile than that demographic information. Or at least, you know, putting those two together can be much more reflective. So that's the first one section's all about them. And so in addition to demographic questions, you might want to just ask questions about, you know, what they're into as it relates to you. And then the second section is all about their industry, your industry, right? So if you, let's see, Beth, let's go back up. What does Beth do? What do you want to tell me? Farming and livestock. Okay. Wholesale food sales. Okay, great. So this is a great place to, assuming you're targeting a survey at a consumer audience, you would want to ask them about their grocery shopping habits. Or, oh, sorry, different Beth. Thank you for clarifying that. Oh yes, I see there are two Beths. So yes, so ask questions in the second section about grocery shopping habits. You know, maybe you'd want to ask about weekly budget, about, you know, you definitely want to ask about frequency, about cooking style and how often they cook, what their cooking skill level is. You know, that would be very telling. And then on the third section, the bottom of the pyramid is where you ask questions that are specific to your brand. So, you know, if you're asking about, this is where we tackle kind of like brand awareness, you know, have they heard of your brand before? Sentiment, what do they think of your brand? And, you know, is it a positive or a negative experience? What do they want to see more from you? So all those types of questions. And you could, since you are in wholesale, if you were thinking of sending a survey to your wholesale customers, which is also a great idea and something I've certainly seen B2B clients do before, you use that same format, but obviously the questions are going to be different. You're not going to ask them in the middle section about what their shopping habits are. They're going to ask, you know, what they're looking for from purchasing partners or whatever the case may be. And in terms of length, I recommend capping any survey at 25 questions and also limiting the number of open response questions that you include. It's great to include, I would say, 2 to 4 open response questions. And I always recommend including a few because you'd be surprised at how willing people are to speak up and share with you what they need from from you and from what you're offering. So, but it's good to limit that just because it helps people get through the survey faster. And also on the back end, it's harder to analyze and read through, you know, lengthy long form answers versus a question that you just get a little chart to analyze afterwards. So I hope that's helped. And in terms of useful results, you know, writing the survey properly will help it be useful, and also ensuring that you get you need a plan to get enough responses to make it useful. You know, that will vary. Like I've had surveys where we have 10 respondents and it's still a very useful survey. If you have a small audience, that's certainly okay. That's not a reason to not do it, but you need to set some goals as you're going into it. And always send, I recommend some kind of incentive to go with the survey, and sending a reminder. Those two things will help vastly in terms of how many responses you get. I hope that answers your question, Beth. Great. anyone else have anything that's top of mind that they want to tackle? Oh, Christine, how do you reach people that aren't in your audience yet? So there are a few ways to reach new people. So the first is to partner with other organizations that have lists. So maybe there are other companies that you could ask to share your survey with their list, or maybe industry organizations that are designed to support your type of organization. So try that first. Try posting it on social media. Try posting it on Front Porch Forum. That's a great place to post your surveys. And I've had luck with that. And then once you get beyond a certain point, you will need to pay for survey responses. And there are a number of ways you can approach that. You can run a Facebook or an Instagram or any kind of social media ad, and have the link in there and have the survey response be part of what you're paying for there. Or you can use a tool like Surveymonkey and buy audience responses, and you are able to target people living in specific areas and stuff like that. So I'd be happy to talk with you about if you have a specific audience that you're trying to reach. There are methods there. It usually does, if you don't have any type of list, you're probably going to need some kind of budget to reach those folks. But it doesn't have to be crazy expensive. You can, from anywhere, I think a budget of like maybe $500 to $2,000 would be ample to get a good survey response. So you can kind of start small and see how that goes. And then Kelly's asking, I use Surveymonkey for all of my work, and they have reasonable pricing, and their analytics is, I think, superior to Google Forms. Google Forms is great because it's free. And so I often recommend that to folks who are on a limited budget and just starting out. So those two are great. Qualtrics is another great one. And then Typeform is also really nice. Okay, Beth is recommending Cervicate. I don't know that one, but I'm sure it's great. So yeah, there are a lot of great tools out there, and I think they all kind of have pluses and minuses, but there are a lot of options. Great. Well, I love that we have all these survey recommendations. Chat form. Awesome. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to go back. We had some questions at the beginning to address. Oh, Christine, I see you asked a little bit about it, kind of claims and labels, organic, regenerative, and local foods, and kind of digging deeper into that. And I think that's a great place to use a survey to kind of untangle what folks are thinking about in terms of all of that. I also think that with issues like that, it's a great opportunity to run a set of interviews, if you're able to, with real live people, and just get them talking about, their understanding of all those terms. You'd be surprised at, what comes out of that. And I find that, it's a really important exercise specifically for people who are passionate about the good food industry, to talk for people who are newer to it, because again, it just gives you a sense of really how small our terms, a term like organic that a lot of us spend a lot of time thinking about is actually a very small part of the average consumer's life and decision-making process. And that's okay, but understanding exactly what that part is really important. And And surveys are a great start, but for more nuanced topics like that, I find it's much more helpful to actually have a real life conversation or a set of conversations with folks. You know, I've heard real life consumers describe themselves as, you know, local foodies and people who want to choose regenerative options. And then you dig deeper and ask them what kind of products they're buying. And it turns out, you know, to make a long story short, that greenwashing really works, and they're just buying based on like these natural labels. And unfortunately, there's a lot of kind of damage to undo there. So that's just one example of something that was a valuable learning that I uncovered in an interview. Great. So Christine Hill, yes. Yeah, it is. I mean, any data can also, I'm glad that you think that that's right. That any data confirming that is exactly that. It's helpful. And it also, you know, I like to joke that surveys are, it's sort of meta. It's like a list of questions, and then you have another list of questions about the questions, and then you have more, it's all about the questions. It's just like this whole Pandora's box. But what happens is that you just need to get started, right? And then you understand more about what you don't know, and you keep going on and iterating. And Anson, I think this is a great question. Thank you for sharing that. Once you have an action plan and then you launch, when do you reevaluate that plan? So this planning process would be different for any business, and depend on kind of your natural or business or organization. It's great to do it at least once a year, but if you can, you should do it more often. So, you know, I look at this stuff as iterative, right? So, you know, you have a limited number of questions and topics that you can tackle at one time. So that's why I was saying before, pick one and then work on it for 2 or 3 months and put that time to reassess, like literally schedule a meeting on your calendar, because it's so easy to just get wrapped up and then never come back to reevaluate your plans. And so you want to look at it as a cycle that kind of loops throughout the whole year. I think best practice for any type of insights work would be to do it on a quarterly basis, kind of set some goals, some areas of focus with what you learned, get out there and see how it works, spending a few months on that, and then coming back and saying, okay, was that the right direction? If yes, how can we double down and do even better? If no, what's the different path that we need to take? And keeping on going forward like that. And I don't think, you know, I see Carolyn's question about a service different than products. I don't think there's a huge difference in evaluating your customer's reaction to what you're selling between services and products. Obviously, you will ask different questions about it and about their experience. But the overall process of sort of ask the questions, get the answers, take the action, then go back to the beginning and repeat is applicable for both service and product businesses for sure. And yes, Kelly, you can see that in Google Analytics. That's where I did that analysis that I was telling you about. Where does that, for the ag world, where does TikTok fit in? That is a funny question. I don't know that I have the answer to that question, but I think that the Vermont Department of Agriculture definitely needs a TikTok account, and that we would easily go viral on a daily basis if we had one. I think there's probably no end to the creativity there. And I was just going to try to look up on Google Analytics, Kelly, if I can show you where to find that search thing. But I think in all seriousness with your question, Anson, that's important to try to not be too boring, right? I mean, and that's also important when you're thinking about the intended audience. I think, of a particular initiative, the social channels are going to be very different depending on what you're trying to do. And it's also thinking about things in different ways. Like, how can we, asking funny questions, like how can we use TikTok, can really help you kind of shake out of having those blinders on and, lead to new ideas that can be breakthroughs. So it's good to inject humor when we can.
Anson really does have donkeys, and I want to walk them. I heard he lets people walk his donkeys.
You're allowed. You can come over anytime. It's how I stay grounded every morning. I have to.
I'm telling you, I think they would be great on TikTok. They could be TikTok stars.
Oh,
Yeah, I'm curious about Becca, about the website search bar, because honestly, that's something that's come up that you were talking about, that I'm like, I don't know if I've looked at the Google search terms, which they've diminished more and more over the years, and that data, but I haven't really looked at the search bar in my own website before. So I'd love to see that.
Yeah, so I can't share my screen because my Google Analytics, the one that I have pulled up, is proprietary for, from a client, but I am seeing it. And are you familiar with the analytic, like the sidebar options?
Yeah.
So there's the one called behavior right below acquisition, has a little drop down that's called site search. And in there, you can look at search terms. And
Great.
it has them all. It's amazing. And so, I have a cousin who has a great vintage shop here in Burlington. It's called Billie Jean Vintage. And I'm like dying to do this with her because, you can think for a clothing business, that's a great example. Like if everybody's shopping for silk pajamas or everybody's shopping for vintage t-shirts, like you could just see how she could use that information and tailor her offerings accordingly. So yeah, I really recommend that one.
Yeah. I like
we have a BJV fan in the chat. I love it.
I like the analytics on your Google page. Like if you have a Google business page, you get regular quarterly or monthly results on that too. And so I can see seasonality of, for specifically my family farm, that people were searching for pumpkins and the pumpkin terminology, and that will kind of pop in. And then the next month, it might be something else. So that's a good way to get like Google search terms that they don't necessarily sometimes put into the actual Google Analytics, but it will give you Google business site data.
Yeah, that's a great example of something, I would say for next year, like look at when that spike happens for the pumpkin search, and then, go back 2 weeks and mark it on the calendar for next time. And that's when you should start talking about pumpkins, because then you'll be out there kind of just before folks are like, oh crap, I need to go get my pumpkins for my porch or for my, jack-o'-lanterns.
Exactly.
And you're sort of in that helpful mindset, you're providing this helpful reminder, and it doesn't feel the other great thing about doing marketing that's really in line with your customers is that it really helps to get rid of that yucky sales feeling that a lot of us really hate. And so it puts you in this position of just this helpful source of information, and you're really helping to make people's lives better. So
totally.
Yeah, and I see Mieko commenting about people like to watch animals, behind the scenes, family life. I think those are all great, if you're able to share that on your social platforms or incorporate that human element. It does a few things. I mean, you have more opportunities to see what's resonating with people, and then kind of iterate again and do more of that, and just get your brand out there and have that opportunity for folks to notice you and opt in. Great. All right. Well, we're getting close to the end of time. I'm happy to stay and keep answering questions if we have them. I'm glad that everybody's finding this helpful. Let's see, how to identify the top visited pages. Oh, Beth is asking about how to identify the top visited pages. So I can answer that question quickly. That's also on Google Analytics in the behavior tab. If you go to site content, and I think this session is being recorded, so if you want to come back and watch this part, listen to this part of the directions, you can do that. And then you go to all pages, and then it shows your, you can adjust for a given time period, and it shows the 1 through 10, what the top pages visited are in the time period you selected. So that behavior tab on Google Analytics let that be one of your takeaways, that is a ripe with information.
And we are recording and we'll be putting up the videos on the gathering page within the next week.
Awesome. Great.
We'll be able to watch them there for about a year.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you everyone so much for coming. Again, it was just I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you all, and hopefully what you learned today will help your businesses move forward and help us grow the farm to table community here in Vermont. And I would love to stay in touch. I shared my information before, and please don't hesitate to reach out with anything that you need. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Becca.
Thank you.